I think we're right here. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It is a great privilege to have you here, Dr. Porter, and it's great timing too. Let me say a few words about our guest. Dr. Martin Porter, he's the executive chair of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Learning Leadership in Europe, CISL Europe. And he's also a senior strategic advisor for the Corporate Leaders Group in Europe. Dr. Porter is a passionate pro-European, and he has had a number of pivotal advisory roles within the CISL's European Corporate Leadership Network. He has held senior roles at the European Climate Foundation. Before that, where he led the Industrial Innovation for Competitiveness. And he had leadership positions within Weber Sadwick and Edelman. Dr. Porter has also served as an advisor for the EU Commission for the Horizon program. And Dr. Porter, today we will be discussing quite extensively for Omnibus, as one might expect. And we will be discussing the so-called dilemma between competitiveness and sustainability. Before we start, and we've had a rather unstable floor, a regulatory floor in the past months, let's start, Dr. Porter, with your take of the latest news, because only last week we had an outcome of the jury of the legal commission on the omnibus. So, what is your take on what happened there?
Thank you, Pakis, and first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you all today, and I really look forward to the conference as well as our conversation. As you said, I think it's extremely timely, this conference, in the light of both what happened last week in the European Parliament, but also the ongoing discussion that the European heads of state will also have tomorrow on exactly this topic. So congratulations on your timing as well for this conference. With respect to the Legal Affairs Committee, their compromise, as I'm sure many of you will know if you've been following this at all, is obviously a result of the way the different political groups in the Parliament have now tried to coalesce on a common view.
It was very political, wasn't it?
Extremely political. The whole revision process obviously is driven as much by politics as it is by the underlying objective science of sustainability and competitiveness. But obviously we now have a point where the proposal is likely to be agreed by the Parliament and then be negotiated by the other EU institutions as well, so the European Commission, the Council of Ministers with the European Parliament. And hopefully that will result in a clearer basis on which everyone can then go forwards with due diligence and sustainability reporting, because as you said and others have said, the uncertainty created by this process is in itself unhelpful to many businesses. So many of the companies that I've been working with in Brussels are worried that the effort at simplification, which is welcome in some respects, clearly, if it creates long-term uncertainty for their planning horizon, their investment horizon, that can actually be counterproductive to the very goal of enhancing competitiveness that the simplification process is seeking to achieve. So the balance, which I think has been mentioned, is crucial to achieve here. Hopefully the details will now become firmer, and businesses will be able to therefore plan on the basis of a firm reporting and due diligence set of obligations. I hope certainly it doesn't go too far, but it is important that this is now concluded and that every company in Europe and beyond, obviously many American companies too, see what the legal situation, the regulatory situation is in Europe to plan against.
Because it makes sense. You need to have stable rules of the game in order to be able to plan, especially for sustainability issues that they have a long-term horizon. So we have, on one hand, the European bodies, the triangle as they call it, that they're trying to simplify and change the rules. And at the same time, we have some member states that are trying something different. In the past month, there was a lot of news about the Spanish climate emergency plan, where Spain sets the European agenda as a foundation, but they set their own targets, exceeding far beyond what the European Commission and the other bodies are saying. For instance, they require that businesses submit a concrete greenhouse gas reduction plan with a minimum 5-year horizon. So Spain goes beyond reporting, and although and is trying to make a real difference in terms of planning long term. So as Brussels and as Omnibus are trying to simplify and reduce costs, at the same time, we have individual member states pushing their own envelope. So the question is this: is this a sort of fragmentation? Is this a compliance nightmare for European companies? Or is it a playground for each member state to set their own tone? What's going on with that?
Well, I think the EU's strength, when it is able to achieve this, is to act together. So as soon as you have a single country that diverges on any of these issues, it can create compliance questions in implementation for any company. I think at the same time, the question of what the ideal long-term transition plan is for any country, for the European Union as a whole, is important. And I think obviously Spain is seeking to advance that agenda when pushing the envelope, as you described it in Spain. But it needs to do that with other EU countries. I think the strength will come from the single market and from a collective approach, which is, as far as possible, one that runs together in all EU countries, respecting obviously the local diversity, the situation economically, culturally, environmentally in every country. This is not a new tension. But the requirement to seek to achieve that in a collective, common way, I think is very important, particularly, and we'll no doubt address this, many of the challenges the EU faces on the sustainability transition, competitiveness, have to be seen in a global context. It doesn't make sense for Spain, for Greece, for any individual country to look at these issues in isolation from the rest of the EU or the rest of the world. We will fail on both competitiveness and sustainability if we seek to reduce it to individual country level activity. So the only way the Spanish approach really makes sense is if it achieves a degree of consensus at European level as well, and that enables the EU to punch its weight and achieve what it needs to do internationally, whether that's in the context, for example, of climate change negotiations, or in the context of economic strategies and competition vis-à-vis other regional blocs, competitive economies, which are obviously also investing in the sustainability transition, increasingly so, I would say. The race is very much on in these terms.
Yeah, and it's a race that the horses seem to be going in different directions here, but let's see where that takes us. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about the Draghi report, and we had the chairman of the chamber discuss about that, and there's a lot of discussion whether the Draghi report, how it is interpreted, and what do we make out of this? Some say only 11% of the total points of the Draghi recommendations are implemented. So you have studied that quite significantly, and you have an opinion piece that's titled "Going Beyond Draghi" that you issued last December. So in that piece, you are talking about strategic competitiveness. So my question to you is, within that strategic competitiveness framework, is there a dilemma between competitiveness and sustainability? Are we missing something sustainability people? Are we missing something here?
Well, I think the two terms are both huge, and we repeat them very often without trying to define them and understand them. And very many times, I think they are used in a way which is unclear or even inconsistent, not deliberately necessarily, but sustainability on its own has so many dimensions to it. I would, in particular, draw attention to the fact that we know more and more about the environmental challenges, the planetary boundaries, how far off, actually, we are from achieving a stable climate and protection of nature, an operating environment, if you want, for companies as much as humans, that is safe and secure in the long term. But it's the transition to get to a sustainable, dynamic equilibrium that is the challenge, rather than seeing where we need to get to. So the sustainability transition for me is as much about innovation and transition as it is about a static concept. And to some extent, competitiveness as well. We talk about competitiveness. The Draghi report talks about it. Even the great Draghi does not define explicitly what he means by competitiveness, how to measure it, and therefore how we should understand it in relation to sustainability. And there is much in his report that I, in that article as well, would agree with. There is, to come back to our previous point, his case that we need to act as Europe rather than individually is abundantly clear. The fact that we need to scale investment in a whole series of economic sectors which we have so far under-invested in if we are going to achieve economic success is very clear. The fact that we need to have a much stronger industrial strategy that is European, not national, is also very clear. There is a series of recommendations he makes which, whatever your definition of sustainability and competitiveness, makes abundant sense. The challenge politically, and you alluded to this, is the difficulty of getting political agreement on it. Yeah. Even his recommendations, 11% was the think tank statistic you mentioned. These are very difficult political challenges to agree. But I think the compatibility question is that when we talk about competitiveness, I suspect if I asked in this room how individually each person would define it, if you're a company, you'll look at this as a so-called economic terms, micro-level competitiveness, and there will be a set of issues that will be important for a company. If you're a policymaker in charge of government, you look at macroeconomics, you will have a different set of issues, indicators that will be important to enable competitiveness and different indicators of success. And Draghi, for example, talks about productivity, and that is obviously an important dimension here.
Like we mentioned, productivity is a national goal, and it was set by the government, it was set by the Federation of Industries. So everyone talking about productivity.
Absolutely, and I think productivity is clearly important, not least because in order to achieve productivity, you need to drive innovation. Innovation is the key link between sustainability and competitiveness. The question for me is how to make sure that innovation is purposeful, is driven towards the ends which we know from a sustainability as well as a narrower economic perspective are the right ones. And in doing that, I think we have to think about what system we are using to assess how productivity is beneficial. And there I would say that's where I think we should go beyond Draghi. And his notion of productivity is not necessarily the only or the ultimate objective, in fact. I think it was mentioned before, the balance in the system that we need to achieve is something that will not automatically come from productivity in isolation. The value creation that you mentioned, whether it's material financial value or social value or otherwise defined environmental value, has to be measured and has to be integral to our idea of competitiveness. And at the moment, for me, the Draghi approach still silos some economic thinking from those broader sustainability challenges rather than considers them from the outset as integral. To go beyond Draghi, we need a system economically that integrates the environmental and social goals that we're trying to achieve and defines competitiveness as a function of our ability to achieve those. And in the work that I've been doing for Cambridge, we try to define competitiveness in a new way, in an innovative way, we think, and to enable us to measure it so that we're able to achieve this combination of strategic competitive advantage and sustainability transition dynamic through those activities, rather than regarding them as two separate exercises that we somehow afterwards try to integrate.
And this is particularly important, especially for our conference as well, because we've been discussing a systems approach since quite a few years ago. So I'm keeping the systems approach that you mentioned. I'm keeping the necessity to define things in a uniform manner. And you mentioned transition quite a few words. And we were discussing earlier today about an article by the Greek Prime Minister in the Financial Times. So it seems that a systems approach, a clear definition, and a transition path seem to be the elements to do this. But we need clear policies to do that. So what is your take on a policy perspective? Because we need somehow a stable framework to base upon. So what is your take about the needs in policies across Europe?
So I think, obviously, the policies that the European Union develops need to be agreed on a basis of shared understanding, facts, and evidence. And some of the policies that I just mentioned, I think, are important to do almost regardless of what other evidence we see before us. So I mentioned the Draghi report's conclusions that we need to scale investment. Yes, we need more liquid capital markets. We need to access savings much better than we do at the moment. We need to be able to target certain sectors of the economy much better than we have, whether that's digital or clean tech, actually, in many ways. So there's a series of policy approaches, I think, at a macro level, which we need to pursue that flow from whether it's the Draghi report or the recommendations that my own work on competitive sustainability.
And policies, they always need to lead somewhere. There needs to be a vision. So what would be your vision towards a sustainable Europe? I mean, we've seen all the differences coming from the EU Green Deal, and then let's go for full regulation, let's go to deregulation. What would be a vision for sustainable Europe?
So the work that we have done in looking at the measurement of competitiveness in this context gives us some interesting evidence on which to base an assessment of where the EU is currently strong or currently weak, and where it has the greatest potential to compete strategically with, for example, China, and I dare say even here with the US as a major competitive economy in the new world. In those areas, when you put social performance, environmental performance in terms of ability, for example, to protect nature or reduce emissions rapidly from a climate change perspective, you can see that actually the performance of different EU member states and the EU as a whole, when you put competitiveness and sustainability transition together, is not as bad as you might think if you only looked at the Draghi report. Yeah. Of course, we have major challenges. I certainly would not pretend otherwise. Urgent and huge challenges. But there are also strengths that the EU has, which I think you can absolutely see here in Greece as well, that are built on a model of social market economy, investment in people, investment also in nature, that delivers other value and other rewards. And in an economy that's changing and is so dynamic, we need to be able to build and nurture and promote those integrated Omnia-type values rather than pursuing just one version of an economic strategy that you may see in China, which is a type of state intervention and directed economy, and indeed an approach to management of their governance that is quite distinct from an American one, for example, and also within those two, the European version. And I don't think we're in a world now where we can ignore the economic challenges being linked to governance, environmental, and social challenges together. And there, the model that the EU has to build on is stronger and more resilient than you might think if you're focusing on just one or other of these alternatives. It needs building on, but it can offer resilience. It can offer a degree of engagement and popular support. It can offer actually achievement of social objectives from economic activity, reduced levels of inequality and protection of the poorest, for example, that other versions of economic strategy don't automatically prioritize either. But it needs to be based also on a vision of achievement of an economy that operates within planetary environmental boundaries as well. That is an imperative as well as those others.
And you are talking about Europe that needs probably to become a better institution. We've had this discussion in our committee that a lot of the things we are discussing today and the past year, all those crises that we're dealing with, in essence, there seems to have an institutional crisis lying underneath. So, in a word, how would you describe the institutional crisis that we are in a phrase, not a word?
Yeah, well, I think anyone, if you've been in Brussels and probably here, we talk about polycrisis. So there is an institutional crisis. Clearly, the EU is facing many of the same challenges that other political entities face around the world, but we are facing multiple urgent, important crises at the same time. And I think one way of looking at this is actually to make the problem bigger and longer rather than shorter and more immediate. We are going through almost a collapse of a system that includes our political system, but not only. And we are seeing a collapse, but not yet the re-emergence of a new system. I was speaking with our fellow speaker, who will join later, about something that Antonio Gramsci said almost 100 years ago, when he was saying an old world is dying, but a new one is still struggling to be born. And everywhere we see monsters, morbid symptoms of that. This is a hugely challenging and difficult set of circumstances of which the EU is now wrestling as a part. But in seeing that change, there is also great opportunity. Yeah. And anyone acting here, any company, any citizen, any government minister, can look at that moment of change and see opportunity in it as well as huge challenge. And the EU is absolutely bound up in that. And I hope that we, through discussions that link sustainability and competitiveness, are able to actually have a joined-up, longer-term vision that enables us to solve the shorter-term problems too.
Okay, opportunity is a key word, Dr. Martin. And we're discussing all this on a more strategic or institutional level. So let's try to bring it down to bricks and mortar business. Let's try to bring this discussion down to individual businesses, larger or smaller. So with all that's going on, and your advice as a scholar for sustainability, you said the word opportunity, and we're discussing this quite a bit today. What is in for the individual companies? What do they have to gain, or what do they have to lose, if not implementing? So I would like you, if you could please, to describe your vision of competitive sustainability, but for a bricks and mortar business, for an everyday business. Yeah. How can you bring that to the reality of the market?
So the first thing I would say is that we began the discussion talking about the reporting obligations under the EU, sustainability reporting, due diligence, and other regulatory tools. They form a basis on which to think about these issues. But if any company regards that as a compliance exercise, they will miss exactly what you are saying about the way in which thinking about sustainability can create ideas, drive innovation, and enable a company, whether it is small or big, to do things differently and to do things better on a whole range of areas. And often, if the question is, how do we think about our future market demand, satisfying our customers, being more cost efficient, being more resilient, if you want, to the shocks that they will see, the answer will be found in a sustainability-related response without making it all about sustainability. So you can save money or energy by maybe installing new forms of insulation or solar panels. That may be an investment and a cost, but will be probably cost-effective in the medium and long term. You can think about your business as one that needs to be free of waste, because waste is a loss of value, and the more that you can avoid it, the more money you should be able to make. So thinking about this issue as something that is inherently an opportunity rather than a compliance obligation, I think is the best starting point for a company. And it's a shame in a way that the debate around the reporting has turned into one that positions actually this as an obligation and a cost, when I think you were saying or that actually ignore those regulatory obligations and start from a clean sheet of paper and think, where can we make our business better?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I think, on the whole now, with all the knowledge that we have, if you come to a set of answers, try and align them with what other people may say about sustainability, and you will probably find they will align. You will be more resilient, more innovative, attract new customers and satisfy your existing customers better, where you are looking at both of those things together. In the past, we didn't have the knowledge and awareness of the sustainability challenge in large, and we could ignore some of those questions. Now we don't have that luxury. But the answers, I think, will often deliver better economic results in the short and medium term. The one thing I would say is there is an investment here as much as a cost. I think often the discussion posits what needs to be done as a cost with no return. I would urge any company, big or small, to think about the transition investments as one on which they should see return rather than just as a sunk cost. That's a challenge. I wouldn't deny that any company and any government actually looking at this has, constraints and financial constraints above all. But don't look at it as a cost. Look at it as an investment.
And Professor, this is exactly our point of discussion today. We need to go beyond the compliance restrictions. We want to go beyond the short-term costs, and we want to look at the long-term opportunity, the thing that will bring resilience for companies and for the societies that host them. It's been a great discussion, and it's been a privilege to having you here. And I thank you very much. And thank you for our audience for your attention.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Μην ανησυχείς. Ευχαριστούμε, Πάκη. Thank you, Dr. Martin Porter. Κρατώ δύο σημεία που μου άρεσαν πάρα πολύ. Companies born sustainably will rapidly grow and become champions, and science is nature diplomacy. Ο κύριος καθηγητής σε κάθε του απάντηση σχεδόν ανέφερε την ανάγκη για collective action και μ' άρεσε πάρα πολύ. Συνεχίζουμε το ίδιο δυναμικά με μία ακόμα one-to-one συζήτηση. Θα είναι διαφορετική, πραγματική καινοτομία στο φετινό συνέδριο. Τους έχουμε βάλει ένα challenge. Καλώ λοιπόν την Ρούλη Χριστοπούλου, μέλος της Επιτροπής Εταιρικής Υπευθυνότητας του Ελληνοαμερικανικού Εμπορικού Επιμελητηρίου, και τον Scott Seawright, συνιδρυτή του Think Beyond Better, στον καλεσμένο μας από την Σκωτία, ο οποίος μου συστήθηκε καθώς έρχονται να σας πω την ιστορία. Το πρωί που συστηθήκαμε μου λέει «I am Scott from Scotland». Έτσι θέλω να με ονομάσεις. Έχουμε βάλει ένα challenge λοιπόν, το οποίο είμαι πολύ περίεργος να δω αν θα ανταποκριθούν. Θα πρέπει να απαντήσει σε 9 ερωτήσεις της Ρούλης σε 9 λεπτά. Καλή επιτυχία και στους δύο.
Καλημέρα σε όλες και όλους. Scott, welcome. As you've heard already, the question here is 9 questions in 9 minutes. So we are diving straight in. The goal here is not analysis, but it's clarity, insight in action. And I couldn't think of a better person to take this challenge than Scott from Scotland. And Scott is a strategist. He's an agile practitioner and a system thinker. He has spent over 3 decades supporting and helping corporations and organizations to bridge principles, purpose, and profitability and performance. And Scott, I believe, has one of the most interesting bios in the room. But if you don't believe me, just check the program, or even better, check his LinkedIn. But rather than tell you about Scott, let's hear what he has to say directly from him. So, Scott, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. Absolutely.
We are very excited to have you here. We are living in a time of profound geopolitical, political, regulatory, and economic disruption. How would you describe the moment we are in, the world we are in, and how should this moment reshape the way we think about sustainability and leadership?
Okay, I'm going to start with a story. So I've got a colleague in the audience here, Nico, and I got called in by the Mars European CIDO, I do technology, to respond to some of the changes in the market here with the regulator and taxation. Yep. So last year, everyone had to have their expenses. They were looking at writing off several million in expenses. The project needed to get done in weeks, not months, and the regulator hadn't decided what they wanted yet. Does this all sound familiar? Yeah. Nikos was also telling me that everything was late. The supplier didn't have the software. And the other bit that I loved was he thought the regulator would change their mind. So as I was listening to Michael earlier, I think sustainability is in this place. That project we got in on time. The Eastern Europe CFO for Royal Canin called it the Impossible Project. And I think everyone here is called to do impossible projects. We had a different name for it. We called it Project Malacca. That and Opa is the only Greek I've got. Okay. I come from Scotland, and the Scottish people are very warm and friendly, like the Greeks. We have Edinburgh, which is called the Athens of the North. We have a very similar panorama. And as I was walking around on Sunday in the rain, it felt like Edinburgh. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But the amount of people that came up and said it's the only rain we've had this year, and we're so pleased to have the rain. I want to start with a poem. And this poem's by T.S. Eliot, who wrote The Wasteland. So maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but here we go. And I have to take my glasses off to read. So 100 years ago, T.S. Eliot wrote of a man called Phlebas. He was a Phoenician merchant. The archetype of civilization built on trade, technology, and the endless turning of the wheel. So in his poem, he has these lines. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and loss. A current undersea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, O you who turned the wheel and looked to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once as handsome and tall as you. In that image, the merchant drowned because of his own waters, and that lies a warning for our century. T.S. Eliot wrote it just after World War I, when empires were shattered, faith was shattered, faith and progress was shattered, and today we're facing our own reckoning. The waters have changed. Now they are carbon, data, debt, disinformation, but the pattern is the same. We have been turning the wheel so fast that we've forgotten to look to windward. Yet this is not our prophecy of doom. Death by water in every myth is also the beginning of renewal, the baptism before rebirth. And our task is to learn to swim again, to lead in a world where survival and sustainability are the same current. And that's what Rowley and I are going to talk about today through a series of questions. All of you, we need to learn to swim again.
That was lovely, and it's so true. So, when we talk about forging a global consensus on sustainability principles, I would like to know what that actually means to you.
As you know, we're in a very, very global world. I was reading your old finance minister's book, Techno-Feudalism. Mm-hmm. If you look at where a lot of our business platforms are coming from, and it's all tech. So software, there's a great book, Software Ate the World. Okay, we're all doing tech now. If we look at the advancements in AI, if we look at the platforms where all of the commerce and business are coming from, if you're looking for where people are buying things from, it's larger platforms. It's not locally. It could be from China with things like Temu, or it could be all the advertising and misinformation coming out of Facebook or Amazon and all those services. Yeah, this is the world we're in. It's all software. It's all technology. I thoroughly believe that the globalization will come from the systems we use and the system constraints that the technology is going to put in on us. And that's without factoring in AI. So as AI comes along, already many of the techno bros over in California are talking about how AI can take away the taxation of humans and human payment. So like your salaries, your wages, they're seeing this as a taxation. And with AI, they don't have to pay that taxation. Every client I'm working with is looking to reduce their staff and go to AI. If you're wondering where your sustainability budget went, it went to fund AI things that may or may not work. And even the best people in AI and all of technology are saying it could kill us. Okay? Martin talked about this new world, old world thing. What tends to happen with time is we can actually have different times in different places around the world. Go to Las Vegas and see the driverless cars. Yeah? Go to countries like Estonia, where they've moved everything into their electronic systems. And you're going to see a world that's very different from some other parts of the world. And I think we'll end up with blocks. And in those blocks, there'll be different standards. And China is leading in the production of solar panels. It's at the same time as it's opening up more coal-fired power stations than anywhere else. Yeah. Europe takes a regulated view to ESG and worries very much about the E. China's great miracle has been taking the vast population to middle class with Land Rover-type cars that are now electric when their parents didn't have toilets in the house. Yeah, these are the changes. It's going to be very difficult for us to get global consensus, but these are the things that are going to form it. In the US, Texas has more wind and solar power than any other state. Now, that's not ideologically driven. That's not regulatory driven. It's driven because of the economics. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So whether you get more solar here, and whether you become, in Greece, a solar exporter, it's going to be down to what you collectively decide and what your regulators want. Some of that, like Spain, will be a local decision. Yeah? But the future is going to be a scary place. The whole world's going to be very tightly competing. Yeah, I'm not. So my question is, we're going to emerge a consensus just by the systems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I think you've covered more than 2 questions so far. So
oh dear.
You've said once, no, more than once, that no one is coming to save us.
Yeah, no one is coming to save us.
And adaptability is the key. What practical advice would you give to companies or to leaders who are here who want to embed a culture of experimentation and resilience?
Look to history So one thing, I've been very lucky. I was born in 1969, and some of you will know economics. So I think, a little like Martin was suggesting, there isn't sustainability and economics. It's all the same thing. So Bretton Woods created the way we worked after World War II, and the way we've all worked and cooperated, and the Western safety and everything else has been something that we've all profited from, and we've all built our economies around. And with the change of AI and with the change of globalization, things are going to change. So Greece needs to look at where it is in the world. Mm-hmm. So you're very close to the Middle East. You're very close to new partners. And as USA and others are moving into more of a America first phase, it might be that you need to look at doing experiments with new trading partners, doing experiments on new products, and doing things that you might not have contemplated before. Why I think this is important is you can wait until you're forced to do it, or you could see it as a competitive advantage and do it now. I see the countries in Europe competing more for economies as well. You must remember the great hope of Brexit was, but if Britain left, we'd have more opportunity to do more trade around the world. I have my views. I'm Scottish. Scotland voted to stay in Europe. But it's going to be a tough world out there for everyone competing. But the good news is, does everyone know the story of the bear and the two men in the woods? Does anyone know the story? So there's two men in the woods, and suddenly they see a black bear running at them. Okay? And one man stops to put on his running shoes. And the other man says, "Why are you putting your running shoes on? You can't outrun a bear." And the first man says, "I've only got to outrun you." Yeah? Okay, so Greece needs to think about who are you outrunning? And also, the world is smaller, there's more technology, we're on flatter platforms. You can do more. You can have more training partners. You can be creative. You can lead. I think as power moves around geography, you're on the east side of Europe, which might be more important in the future than being on the west side of Europe. Yeah.
That sounds reasonable. So I can see that our time is out, so we may not have answered to 9 questions, but I think we get all the substance behind your answer. And just before we close and handing the mic to the next question, you said that one of our early prep calls was a spark for a new idea that it's called, let me see how it's called. It's called Stop Worrying, Lead.
Yeah.
So if you have like 30 seconds, no more than 30 seconds, to tell us what is this about.
I'm going to cram in a question that we spoke about as well, right? This is all about the next generation, okay? Any leaders here who are, like me, a little bit gray and older, find yourself a younger digital person to be a digital buddy and to explain to you what's happening in technology and what's happening and talk about ChatGPT and talk about how people are starting to use it and talk about how people are setting businesses up in 20 minutes, yeah, and get into understanding that. One thing we need is the younger people to step forward into leadership and to help, because the younger people were born in this strange, new, chaotic world, and the younger people should have a voice. Now, I know someone said today that the population's bigger now for young people ever, but it's not in Greece. Greece has the same problem in Scotland. We've got a falling population. Yeah. So for every organization out there, I would have a definite scheme to get the next level of entrepreneurs in, helping on an equal footing, not doing a partnership to work out how we did banking 40 years ago when I started, yeah, and to start driving ideas and to start planting seeds. Yeah, and to help people in this space, I started an initiative after talking to Rowley called Stop Worrying, Lead. Yeah, and this is the way we get through where we are. Micro experiments, trying things out. Some of them will fail. If 10 fail and one becomes the next biggest thing in Greece, then it didn't cost you much. Yeah? But the young people are worried to lead, and the older people are worried about the future. The answer is be together. Stop worrying, lead. And I'm
So
sorry,
thank you
I'm
for
sorry I
that.
took up so much time.
That's, I think, our key takeaway. Learn how to swim and worry not, lead. Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.